Шановні колеги, доброго ранку.
Dear colleagues, good morning. We are really glad to welcome you at the presentation of our one more audit. We are speaking about our project, the audit of foreign policy, and today we are speaking about relationship between Ukraine and Latvia. This project, this implementation of the project is really important. Why? First, because the anniversary we are going to celebrate, this is centenary of statehood of Latvia and Ukraine, and the relationship between our countries. And also we have a unique presentation today. We have the highest level of representation today, and both from the side of Ukraine and from the side of Latvia, and we are really glad to welcome Andrejs, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. We are really grateful to you that you came here to take part in this event. Also, I would like to sincerely thank the Embassy of Latvia in Ukraine and personally Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Latvia to Ukraine, Andrejs, and for the support of this report. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ambassador Andrejs. You're welcome. Dear friends, good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to greet you all at this presentation of the foreign policy audit Ukraine-Latvia. I believe that this is a really important project prepared by New Europe Center and Latvian Institute of International Affairs. Why it is so important? As Kateryna said, this year Latvia marks centenary of its independence, and the Ukrainian Republic was also pronounced a century ago, and we had official relationship then. So, and this project is a small present to celebrate the centenary of independence of our countries, and I would like to invite you to the open lecture of Eric Jakobsons that will be held not in Kiev but in Lviv on the 28th of March at 11 a.m. in Polytechnic University, and he will specifically say about our relationship 100 years ago. And I believe that Eric is one of the best historians who work in this area. Second, it is important because before this we didn't have such a book, such a material that would focus on our bilateral relationship, and I really hope that this research will be a basis for further materials. I would like to specifically thank Kateryna Zarembo for this work, and I hope for further contacts between our institutes and the deepening of cooperation between the institute and the center. And I won't tell you more in detail about this because we have really powerful representation here. Alexander Kadola, he did really a lot to strengthen interparliamentary cooperation. Recently, he got a certificate from the chairman of the Latvian Parliament. Also have the visit, and we waited for Rafat Chubarov, and he worked in Latvia. He participated in the People's Front and helped a lot to restore the statehood of Latvia. He phoned me yesterday and he said that today he needs to be in the parliament because a really important issue is heard there about parliamentary elections in Russia. And we know that deputy ministers, we are really thankful to Vasily that he joined us, and we do not have much time, so I will stop here, and I wish everyone to have a fruitful discussion. We are really grateful for these remarks to you. Thank you. Now we would like to introduce our honorable our guests. Vasil Bodnar, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Alexander Kadola, Chairman of the Group of the Interparliamentary Relations with the Republic of Lithuania, and Andrejs, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, and Elizabeth Vizgunova, researcher of the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. And this cooperation for me was really a pleasure for me at all the stages of research. Together with Elizabeth, we are going to present briefly this research that you have the opportunity to read on paper and online. And for me, this is really pleasant that I am as a researcher. I have the opportunity to consider our relationship between our countries, and I find many surprises there. And I understood that in the 1990s, we had a lot of common things on geopolitical level in 1990s. They spoke about neutrality and about bridge between the West and the East, and the positioning of the country on geopolitical arena. And these discussions, they were stopped, and European integration became the basis for independence of Latvia. And for me, it was really interesting that Ukraine, and this is not unique, and this choice that we see for Latvia, it was really positive and had many constructive and positive consequences. Also, it was interesting for me to know that the events after 2014, how Russian aggression influenced Latvia, and we know that Russian aggression for many countries, partners of Ukraine, it became a drive for deepening of cooperation, or deepening of partnership. And in Latvia, there were changes in the perception of the identity, and Elizaveta will tell us more about it. And it is interesting how Ukraine influences Latvia, not only how Latvia influences Ukraine and other partner countries. So also we spoke with our colleagues from the consultative missions from Latvia that work in Ukraine. This is from the side of the European Union. And in Latvia, an interesting approach to Ukraine in Latvia. They act like peers. They share the experience. This is partner to partner, not teacher to pupil cooperation. So we were speaking about it at different levels with the representatives of state structures and with the Ukrainian diplomats, and they shared the same experience. And this is an interesting way of partnership, and I would like to stress that Latvia is ready to learn from Ukraine also. And this is, I believe that in communication with EU countries, sometimes for Ukraine, this is a surprise. This is real partnership. And I would like to say, I would like to stress what Mr. Ambassador said. For Latvia's joint history is really important. Today we have a really important turn when we are speaking about historic cooperation. Ukraine recently, together with its close partners or not so close partners, the historic dialogue brings a lot of disputes. And with Latvia, this is not the case. Latvia stresses that the cooperation with Ukraine is really important, and I heard it at different level. And also, this is the proper influence on the perception of the identity of other peoples.
If I may.
Отже,
Now, when we started with the audit, we departed from the idea that Ukraine can learn something from Latvia in terms of its Euro-Atlantic identity formation. At the same time, after Russia's aggression on Crimea, there seems to be a learning process which also has instituted itself in Latvia. Now, let's start with some of the most important keywords that came up during our interviews and also the period of research. Firstly, when Latvia was forming its Euro-Atlantic identity, there was a very clear trend of consistency. So since 1995 and even before that, when the main foreign policy vectors of Latvia were formulated, it had the very clear aim of joining the Euro-Atlantic security and political structures as its primary goal. Now in Ukraine, this has not been as consistent, and perhaps this is something which can serve as a takeaway that really needs to somehow be a refocus of foreign policy priorities and really an formulation of them very clearly. And there also needs to be a commitment to back it up. Now, 2004 was definitely a landmark year, both for Latvia acceding NATO and the European Union, but also with the Orange Revolution taking place in Ukraine. Of course, here we can definitely speak about resonance, which is very important at the moment and which also explains why Latvia is a staunch supporter not only of Ukraine's territorial independence, but also its strivings towards integrating itself into the Euro-Atlantic security space. We can also see this resonance taking place in the academic spectrum. For instance, every year in the Riga conference, which is an annual prominent diplomatic forum that takes place in Riga, there's a lot of discussion which focuses on the current political and security developments in Ukraine, as well as the foreign security policy of Russia. During its presidency, Latvia used its position within the European political scene to promote the issues that revolve around Ukraine foreign politics, namely not only through the Riga summit, which took place in 2015, but also the Ukrainian civil partnership, and as well different forums, as well other forums at that point. Now, another perhaps change or a shift that has been taking place relates to Latvia's understanding of security. There are many different narratives that are currently taking sort of the public space, and some of them revolve around soft security issues. The consolidation of the ethnically fractured society in Latvia, as well as the consolidation of information space, are now becoming increasingly important in the public narrative as well as the security thinking of the state administration. Of course, as I mentioned before, Latvia is a very staunch supporter of the sanctions regime against Russia. It is also supporting Ukraine very adamantly in international forums, United Nations and the OSCE, etc. And Latvia has also been trying to contribute to Ukraine's security with its comparatively modest means, but at the same time, these have been very clear, let's say, signals. So, for instance, there's the NATO Trust Fund for Ukraine, as well as training new Ukrainian officers and taking in the wounded soldiers from the fights in eastern Ukraine. Now, what I'm trying to say with this is that it seems to me that Latvia's self-perception as a core actor of the Euro-Atlantic security structure seem to have changed and actually become much stronger and more pronounced. This also relates to the soft security issues, which are more and more recurrent in the public discussions in Latvia. Now, perhaps I can move on to the second point, which we also have discussed in the audit, which relates to the political forces in Latvia. Now, it seems to me that there is definitely a consensus and an absolute support for Ukraine's territorial independence of sovereignty as a state. So what I'm trying to say is basically that the political spectrum has somehow put their differences aside on this question. At the same time, the repercussions on the political spectrum in Latvia have been noted. For instance, Harmony, which is also coined as the pro-Russian party, and their constituency is mainly based in the ethnically Russian part of society, has firstly cut the official ties with the United Russia Party, And secondly, they have finally obtained admission to the European Socialist Party at the European Parliament, which basically means that indeed they have become an official European Union level party. The same accounts for different political forces. As we were conducting the interviews, the Greens and the Farmers, the National Alliance and Unity, the three parties of the coalition, stated four main keywords. Firstly, they always reference the historic ties, and now, as Kateryna mentioned before, this is not only the Soviet period, but also the 1917 to 1920 Ukraine, which seemed somewhat surprising to both of us. Now, secondly, it is the absolute support for Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration and the striving towards it. Nonetheless, they kept emphasizing corruption as a major issue on the policy menu of Ukraine. And lastly, the idea of a more sober view of Latvia's own positioning in the Euro-Atlantic structures as well as of its security was also something that was recurrent as a narrative. It's really this sobering view of the aftermath of what happened at Crimea. And now, lastly, I think I should also mention the media space, which is probably something which is widely discussed not only in Latvia but also in Ukraine. Latvia is, of course, taking this challenge very seriously. This is proven by the fact that there is the NATO Strategic Communications Center, which is established in Riga. There is also the Baltic Media Center now, which is a common initiative of the Baltic states to tackle the information space threats that Latvia is facing. There are two recurrent issues on this matter. Firstly, this is the ethnic composition of Latvia now, whereas we do not have to take the Russian speakers and the Latvian speakers as two monolithic entities. It's really, they are very strongly marked by following separate media spaces. The two separate media spaces are indeed a very serious challenge, especially taking into account that the Russian-speaking population tends to follow the Russian media outlets, which also derive their sources from the Russian information space, whereas the Latvian media sources tend to reference more the Western media outlets, and this also means that the Latvian media space, at least the Latvian media space, is relatively resilient to Russian disinformation. Now, I will pass the microphone back to my colleague, and thank you.
Дуже дякую, Елізабета. Я буквально декілька завершуючих таких ремарок хотіла би додати.
Thank you. I would like to add several remarks on the business connections between Latvia and Ukraine. Economics is not the key link, but there are other aspects of connections besides that Ukraine invests more than Latvia. Ukraine invests more in Latvia than Latvia into Ukraine. But the investors in Ukraine left Ukraine since 2014, but also this deterioration of investment into Ukraine is also due to corruption. There are no big problems in this or some mysteries where solutions should be seen for a long time. There are two problems. One is easier. It is a lack of official appointment of an ambassador to Latvia from Ukraine. There is only an acting ambassador. So appointment of an ambassador to Latvia from Ukraine is very important in pre-election period in Ukraine, and this is also a centenary year of Latvia-Ukraine relations. This is why. And the second is business climate in Ukraine. Ukraine has lower ratings of doing business than Latvia. The new ratings of perception of corruption was published. Ukraine is on 130th place. Latvia is on the 40th, also not the first, but the 40th place. So for Latvian diplomats, the fact means Latvian businesses have problems in Ukraine with doing business. So when we asked Ministry of Economics how they explain this outflow of investment and we were said by Latvian ministry that this is because of problems in doing business, so with business climate in Ukraine. So I would like to pass the floor now to our esteemed speakers, please. Mr. State Secretary, we are giving the floor to you. Could you tell us how do you assess the current state of Ukraine-Latvian relations? Maybe we have missed some problems. What could be improved?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of parliament, deputy minister, ambassadors, colleagues, friends. First of all, I would like to thank Kateryna and Elizabeth for the extensive analysis and audit of Latvian-Ukrainian relations. Indeed, I fully subscribe to Ambassador's assessment that this is a wonderful present for the centennial of our modern republics, of our modern states. But of course, it's also a very useful food for thought about the next 100 years, how to deepen our relations, how to build new ties between young generations, and how to make this partnership not only strategic on paper, but really meaningful, multifaceted and diverse. This is I tried to count 7 or 8 times visiting to Ukraine. I have been here in bad times, in turbulent times, during the pre-Orange Revolution, after Orange Revolution, during Maidan, after Maidan, and during the last 4 years as well. I have been visiting Kiev and Odessa and other cities in Ukraine. So I'm really honored to be here today at this wonderful sunny day, and I fully subscribe that the relations are solid today. They are very diverse. Our presidents are meeting regularly, our speakers are meeting regularly. 1/3 of the Latvian parliament belongs to the Latvian-Ukrainian Friendship Group. We are parliamentary democracy, so we report every Wednesday to the parliament. So this is really important in terms of checks and balances. This is a very important structure. Ministers are regularly here, and I'm very happy that in terms of our commitment and engagement, I think per capita we are one of the most committed and engaged countries in the European Union. We don't share direct borders, as it has been said. We don't claim that we are brothers, but we believe that we are good partners and we are committed partners. And officially, I consider important to stress again that we are fully behind your territorial integrity, independence, independent foreign policy, and it is our strategic goal in Latvia's and European foreign policy to bring our relations as closely as possible, as strategic as possible. And we have been working tirelessly in the foreign ministry to not to look that much back, but to look as much forward as possible. And as the saying goes, not to waste any crisis, not to waste any opportunity, and to see our common points of commonalities and interests. I can't be completely objective, but I think that in many respects, Latvia could be seen as a laboratory of change. And researchers have identified a number of areas where we can share our mistakes, we can share our success stories, we can share our most recent transformation. We are coming very much from the same background. We've been for 50 years behind Iron Curtain on the wrong side of history, and 27 years we telescoped development into EU, NATO, OECD, Eurozone, Schengen, PESCO, any possible layer of security has been tested and has been tried on our soil. And you're absolutely right in terms of the neighborhood. We share Belarusian border, we share Russian border, we have quite complex history, quite complex ethnic composition of the population. And I think these areas have been identified by researchers very, very skillfully, where we can be of certain relevance and sense. This year, I think, is very, very crucial. We are working very hard to make this European agenda irreversible, to make this European agenda as forward-leaning as possible. And we stand ready to share our experience. Just a few examples to flag again what I'm talking about. Issue of education reform. There are different models. We know how controversial it is, how hotly debated is here. We don't say that we are the best. We don't say that we have solved every legacy of the Soviet period. But we are very much committed to share with your Ministry of Education how it has been done in Latvia, how we've moved to this 60-40 model, 60% of the subjects in Latvian after 5th grade in high schools, how now we are going to 80-20 model. We can show how it has been done, how we have built, how we're building the nation. When Latvia regained independence, in terms of ethnic minorities, 80% had no clue in Latvian. 27 years have passed, and this ratio has changed fundamentally. 80% of ethnic minorities are fluent in Latvian, and mostly elderly people are still struggling. But it can be done in one generation in building a cohesive society. The same goes for a very important point. You can call it rule of law, you can call it fight against corruption, you can call it making economy competitive, but application of all kind of electronic registers, electronic data, electronic declarations, e-governance, e-health, e-subscription for drugs. Again, we are not perfect. We have had a lot of bruises and a lot of bumps, but we firmly believe that this is a very important and this is a very right approach to make economy competitive, to save finances for the public, and to have a certain coherency in taxation. I know that the scope is different. We are 2 million people, you are 40+ million people, but I think the method is the same. And we certainly stand ready to share how it can be done. It can be done, it should be done, and I think this is the future. When it comes to the agriculture, you are a powerhouse in Europe, on European scale. We are much smaller, though we are also within European Union. We are number 5, number 6 biggest grain exporter, and we stand ready to share our experience. We have started with Chernihiv Oblast a few years ago, and we're ready to share how veterinary services can be arranged, how standardization can be arranged. We know the association agreement is very important, but application of European legislation, application of free trade agreement, association agreement is fundamental. And we are here to help to translate those documents on the ground level. Of course, when it comes to the foreign policy, when it comes to EU and NATO agenda, we fully support your independence choice. Per capita, we have one of the highest ratio of observers, be it in east of Ukraine. We stand ready to cooperate on NATO track. And this year, 2018, we'll have another round of important goalposts. We'll have a NATO summit in July. We think that the Ukraine-NATO Commission should be used to full extent. We will have shortly a summit of Friends of Ukraine in Copenhagen in June. So we certainly urge your government to identify priorities, and when the priorities are identified, to follow them and to implement them. I usually paraphrase the famous saying, implementation, implementation, and implementation. This is the most important thing what we should do. Communications, media, hybrid threats, resilience have been mentioned by researchers. Again, we think that we think that we are living in a quite dangerous world. I'm not here to spook you, you know very well the challenges, but we certainly are like-minded, and we believe that we have accumulated again quite interesting experience in facing be it Kremlin's propaganda, or be it cyber attacks, or all kind of visible and invisible tricks. With energy security, of course, what we think should be exposed. I think this is in a nutshell why we are here. I'm very happy to see a lot of old friends, and I hope to meet new friends as well. And I think that it's very important that this commitment and this friendship goes beyond Kiev, beyond the capital. And this is the intention of our government as well, to spread the network of friendships around the country, to engage the young people. We are very pleased that in terms of Erasmus+, Ukrainians are one of the most devoted partner of the European Union, and again, I'm a believer in the windows of opportunity, and I know that many of those have been wasted in Ukraine in the past. I very much urge you not to waste those opportunities this time, and please count on Latvia in your endeavors. Thank you.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much to the Mr. State Secretary. I have two remarks to your speech. The first is I am still surprised with national proud of Latvia, and the second is Latvia's not speaking much about its achievements. On the other hand, when we have been making this research, it was very grateful for me when I was told not to speak about one small country, although the country is smaller, but the representation which we see here is talking for itself. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kadola because he should go to the Verkhovna Rada later. Mr. Alexander Kadola, MP of Ukraine, chairman of the Interparliamentary Group the relations with the Republic of Latvia. Please tell us about the perspectives of our partnership with Latvia. Yes, I will be at 10 o'clock at the Parliament because I want to vote for not recognition of Crimea as Russian territory. Dear colleagues, today I am very glad to be here at this meeting devoted to the analysis of connections between Latvia and Ukraine, and I would like to tell about our interparliamentary relations. I would like to thank the New Europe Center and Latvian Institute of International Affairs for this research. I have been working the first deputy head of Chernigiv Regional Council, and those days I started my relations with Latvia in decentralization, sharing experience of Latvia, best cases, and when Latvian colleagues came to us, our counterparts didn't say we came to teach you. They always said that they want to share their peer-to-peer experience. Our group was established on 26th of February 2015. As of today, we have 34 MPs in our composition from different factions and parties, and they represent different regions of Ukraine. I represent Chernigiv region at the majority MP. Recent years, I think this is a confirmation of our work. We have spread our contacts to higher outreach at the level of communities and civil society and between governmental bodies. Our groups of friendship, I mean Ukrainian friendship group and Latvian group headed by Highness Mažulis. Although I am a politician, I would like to talk about more specific aspects of our cooperation. We have many achievements, very demonstrative exchanges by our parliamentary delegations. During 2 years, we have had many exchanges with parliamentary delegations. There were visits at the top level of our speakers, and recently we have visited Latvia with Andrejs. Mr. Ambassador said that we are now waiting for the chairman of Latvian Parliament to come to Kiev. Also, the presidential visits took place, so we have great cooperation and great results in follow-up of these visits, strengthening our economic cooperation and so on. I would like in this context to say that Chernigiv region, which I represent, and we have mentioned it several times today, is a pilot project, let's say, in cooperation between Latvia and Ukraine, and strengthening contacts between communities and the decentralization reform. This is fruitful cooperation which bring real results today. As an example of this cooperation, we can name that Nizhyn, the place from which I am, it has signed the agreement with Latvian city of Prile, and also thanks to support our parliamentary groups of friendship in Chernigiv in 2016, we established an honorable consulate of Latvia in Chernigiv region. All this was thanks to support of MPs of Latvian Parliament and Ukrainian Parliament. I would like to thank my colleagues, my counterparts from Latvian Sejm, especially Andrejs Mažulis, and I would like Mr. State Secretary to greet Mr. Mažulis on my part. Today we know that this year Latvia will see parliamentary elections, and we wish you to have the same active, proactive composition of MPs in your parliament for your next convocation. As you know, friends are seen in trouble, and Latvian people indeed support Ukrainian state by rehabilitation and treatment of our ATO soldiers and charitable support sport. Many times we send children for treatment and rehabilitation to Latvia. Their children whose parents died or became victims of the Russian aggression to Ukraine. Talking about economic cooperation, as we have already mentioned, the cooperation is rather active between our agricultural producers. And last year, Chernihiv region saw opening Riga Khlib company, which bread is very popular not only in Chernihiv region so far. 60 people of staff are working there, but it is planned to extend it to 300 members of staff. So this is specific work, not just general phrases and declarations. Our Chernihiv company, Interathletica, producer of sports grounds for children for 3 years, have been supplying its products to Latvia, and our Latvian counterparts set the goal that modern sports grounds should be placed in every community. This is a good example of our cooperation. It is no secret that there are 3 well-known hotels of Ukrainian owner Oleg Vishnyakov, Pullman. 5-star hotel was opened 1.5 years ago. This is Ukrainian investment to Latvian Republic. So we can talk much. Of course, our objective for this year is to have an ambassador being appointed officially to Latvia. Yevgen Perebinis was the ambassador, but now he is an ambassador to Czech Republic. So today, this is very relevant issue to have an official appointment of an ambassador. This is our joint task with the President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to get this issue addressed so that our country is represented by an ambassador of Ukraine to Latvia. Of course, sometimes there are some misunderstandings. You know that at the end of December, the Cabinet of Ministers, by mistake, recognized Latvian Republic as an offshore. As you remember, Latvia and Estonia were listed. This issue was addressed by our group, and the Cabinet of Ministers corrected the mistake. So we are talking openly, speaking frankly about such situation, but misunderstandings are always reserved in our relations. This is the main thing that we can correct the situation. We are able to correct it. The main thing I would like to note, during all years of our cooperation, I have proved for myself that we have many joint things. This is our history, culture, and mentality, but the main thing, our aspirations for independence and freedom. And I'm very glad that Latvia is our partner in this way to the European home. On this path, Latvia is a very good example of how a country can develop in the European space, and I am sure we will have not only common past but also common future. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. It seems to me that in interparliamentary groups of friendship, the people drivers should be present. This is very important. There should be such flagships. And we have these flagships both on the Latvian side and on the Ukrainian side. Thank you very much for your speech. I would like to give the floor to Vasil Mironovich Bodnar, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Is everything so good? Dear friends,
Мені надзвичайно приємно.
I am very glad that the MP of Ukraine is present here, and what he said is very correct. What else I can say? I can't tell about bad things. This is not my position to do so. I have learned the files for a long time, but I have not found anything which would be not in concordance. No discordances in our relations. Everything is so positive. Only positive relations we have in follow-up of our mutual visits. Even the case of so-called offshores, all such misunderstandings, they were resolved fast. This is proving that we have joint interests, joint challenges. And we are very thankful to Latvia today that Latvia is an important member of NATO and the EU, and we are thankful Latvia for its specific steps in counteraction to the aggression of Russia to Ukraine. Latvia also is subject to such threat. I would like to share Ms. Elizabeth's opinion as concerned media space, because half of our life is virtual. We do not live in reality, we live mostly in media space. And who is covering positive topics in mass media? Mostly some negative aspects are covered. 0.7% of negative aspects in our relations. This is the percentage, but this 0.7% they are highlighted and covered in the media. Ukraine, like Latvia, is an object of influence of media, pro-Russian media, Russian Federation's mass media. So our objective is not only our most important task is to develop our partnership and our friendly relations, but also to give positive signals to our societies and highlight them, and not to give any chance to this third party which is not interested in our friendship and partnership, not to give them the opportunity to highlight negative aspects in the mass media. This next is association agreement of Ukraine. This association agreement is in the period of implementation, and every of us is the individual responsible for this implementation in society, in every structure of society. The changes will be implemented. We should demonstrate that we are going the path towards the European Europe, and Latvia is the best case. We should share Latvian experience, specific experience. Thank you very much for giving us these best cases which we can share, and we can learn lessons, some also mistakes which Latvia made on its path. We can learn on them. Unfortunately, recently, we in Ukraine sometimes learn lessons on our own mistakes, but not on some others' mistakes. As concerns education reform, of course, Latvia has brilliant results. For 26 years, they have changed the perception of national state language, and we are only at the start of this process. We are criticized very much, and we have political opposition and resistance, but we should analyze what are the roots, but the roots are in the Russian Federation. So development of the topics which give rise to ethnic hatred, this is the plan of Russia to destabilize the situation in Ukraine using ethnic minorities issues. We should be very careful, but we should pursue our policy, and specific steps are being made. This is development of our trade. Yes, investments has diminished, but Latvian investments to Ukraine has increased. Yes, we have problems in agriculture, but there are positive cases which are being used in Ukraine. So let's start talking about balance, about strengths and weaknesses, and use the analysis results. Last year, 1/3 of trade increased, and Chernihiv products are exported to Latvia. This could be assessed in different manners, but the marketplace, the labor marketplace is open now for Ukrainians. I have met my friends from Ternopil recently. Also, Ternopil has some problems, but Ternopil welfare is improving also because many people from Ternopil are now workers in Latvia. Latvia's experience of internal reforms is a very important, a very big role Latvia plays how to demonstrate the progress of reforms. Not only reform of combating corruption. The European states also have cases of corruption. Let's talk about correct balance. In some reforms we have progress, in some reforms we have digress, but we are developing not in one plane, but in many planes. So let's demonstrate well-balanced approach. We are very thankful to our Latvian friends for the support of positive developments in Ukraine. And by our joint efforts, I am sure we will be able to prove to our EU counterparts that not everything is bad in Ukraine, and also we should demonstrate that Russia continues its aggression by hybrid measures. Yes, we have many internal objectives to address and to achieve, but the EU can help us in many things, as it did to other countries who exceeded the EU. First, the countries were candidates, and then they exceeded the EU. Several years ago, many people were skeptical even about signing the association agreement. So, to finalize, I would like to respond to the issue concerning the official appointment of ambassador. We are working on this, and jointly with the President and the Verkhovna Rada, we will definitely find the candidature for ambassador, and the law which will be voted today will help in this. So I call on our MPs to vote for the law. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasil, for your speech. Mr. Alexander, we also are thankful to you for your speech. Mr. Vasil, thank you very much again for your comprehensive speech. Many services are very close for me. I would like
About the threats in Ukraine and in Latvia, part of people are Russian speakers, and they are of Russian origin, and 1/4 of citizens of Latvia have Russian origin, and 80% can speak Russian, so this is the majority of the country. And the illustration of success of policy of statehood and creation of the state is that in 2012 the issue of Russian language as a state language was posed for referendum, and the majority voted against. So we have such result, and this was done due to proper educational policy in Latvia. So we are going to have a Q&A session. Please, you can share your opinion with us. Thank you. Please introduce yourself first. Good afternoon, everyone. Pakhomova Valeria, representation of the President in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. I would like to thank you for this wonderful work that was carried out concerning relationship between Ukraine and Latvia. And I would like to ask whether the issue of Crimea will be illustrated, properly highlighted, and in what way. Do you have more questions? We would like to collect the questions. No, there are no. So we are giving the floor to the deputy.
In Crimea, I want to be crystal clear. We have, in the European Union, we advocate very firm position that the violation of international law which has happened cannot be forgotten and cannot be forgiven. And we are very consistent in reminding everyone what has happened, what is still going on, and how the society and the business circles and the general public should react to this situation. It's a challenge, but of course we're trying to monitor the situation as closely as possible. And from the Foreign Ministry of Latvia, it's not just an article which our ministers have published at the anniversary of the takeover, but it's a consistent work on government web pages with the media, reminding that when it comes to real estate, it's a violation of EU sanctions to buy any property without the consent of the real owners of the properties there. We remind about the movement of how traveling there could happen legally. We are reminding, of course, all publishing houses and others regarding the maps and books and etc. So it's a quite consistent work which is being done in Latvia, and we also remind wider our partners in the European Union and in other international organizations that to succeed at the end, we should do it on a daily basis, and such gross violation of international law cannot be forgiven or forgotten. As you might know, for 50 years, Baltic states had been de facto members of the Soviet Union, but in legal terms, de jure, they've been independent states, and more than 30 nations that time, since 1940, had this consistent position of non-recognition of illegal occupation of the Baltic states. It took 2 generations, 50 years, long years, but at the end of the day, we succeeded. So we firmly believe that same principles should be applied, same methods should be applied. Sanctions related to Crimea, related to aggression in southeast of Ukraine, Donbass, should stay in place, and this policy should go on until this violation is reversed.
Звичайно,
Yes, of course, Crimea is on the agenda in negotiations with the partners and the representatives of embassies. They know that each time this issue is brought for discussion, and we are grateful to Latvia for solidarity. At the same time, we motivate all the countries of the European Union and international community to raise this issue in their countries. For example, in Poland, we have such a trend. The colleagues from one body, the Polish and Russian Center of Dialogue, so they published a book in light of foreign affairs, and there will be a presentation of this book, so we invite you. Despite this name, the title of the book, the Center studies the challenges that go from Russia, including challenges concerning Crimea, and we will be grateful if this topic of Crimea, of illegal occupation, the violations of human rights and the rights of Crimean Tatars, and the bringing of weapons of mass destruction to the Crimea. So this issue should be on the agenda of the European Union, and it should be voiced on the world agenda. So do you have other questions or comments, please?
My name is Ines Vojka, and at the moment I'm working here in Kiev with United Nations as a senior anti-corruption advisor. But right after Maidan, we worked very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia to bring the Latvian experience here. And I wanted to suggest, my comment is regarding your remark, why do we talk only about corruption? You know, we have other reforms. I would say that as a politician, this is a very dangerous statement, because this is something very corrupt people usually say. And I believe this is not what, what you meant. So I want to suggest another approach. Rather than dividing these things, like let's not talk about corruption and talk about other reforms, let's see how we can, how to say, combine it. And if you don't like word corruption, you can talk about building integrity. You know, you can talk about positive things, but you will not be able to avoid to build integrity into your education reforms, into your healthcare reforms, into your environmental reforms and infrastructure, anything. And I think that is the future for Ukraine, of building institutions with integrity in each of the sector, and but not avoiding the question that there are so many different ways the culture and the systems have promoted misuse of public funds for private benefit, and that has to stop. I hope you agree.
Can I ask?
Yes, of course. Let me just pass you the mic.
All I would like to say It's just not only to talk about negative things. Doesn't mean, maybe I was read in the wrong way, or maybe it was my words were not correct in understanding, but corruption is the big evil in Ukraine, and it should be fought with all the strength and all the mighty. The society, international partners, we should do all we can, because we know how it harms all the spheres of our life. No problem with that, and that is exactly the priority of government, society. We should concentrate on this. But there are other dimensions which will not show, because what I would like to deliver is that Russia is using these opportunities that, they are corrupt, they are doing wrong, all the reforms are under the auspice of corruption, and all corruptions is going to the deep society fields, and only corruption is dominating the society. So that is the wrong reading, because the other dimensions of the reforms, they are in the shadow of the corruption. Okay, maybe it was, let's say, maybe I was not correct in pointing out the details, but let's not forget about the positive things as well. That's my key message.
I think I can fully subscribe that we see lots of positive messages, and we have seen that this time, after revolution of Maidan, the country and the leadership is focused on reforms, and the last 2-3 years we have seen tremendous development. But structurally speaking, I think Ukraine to some extent faces the same challenges what we have been facing. When we regained independence in Singing Revolution in 1990, our friends from Europe, from North America were coming to Latvia, and they said to us, well, you are very brave, you are remarkable people, but the country is very weak. And the first challenge has been to build up the structures. And of course, I think the foreign ministries are the least corrupt, because these foreign ministries really did not exist during the Soviet times. So those puppet ministries which existed, they are history. But it's more, of course, challenging to streamline and build up structures dealing with state-owned enterprises, with the monopolies, with the agricultural sector, etc. And again, we are not perfect. We are being criticized a lot. We are being vetted a lot. But our method has been that, first of all, we want to be in all possible institutions, like OECD, etc. So you know exactly where you are. I don't know if Russian singer Viktor Tsoi is still popular in Ukraine or not, but he had a very wonderful line in one of his songs. Все говорят, что мы вместе, но немногие знают в каком. And first of all, to understand the challenge, you have to identify where you are, what is the diagnosis, and then depending on the power sharing of power, you have to identify the shortest way to go forward, and never look back and always go forward. And I think this is what is most crucial, to realize that the goal is there, and the nation and the leadership should be focused on the same goal. When it comes to Russia and other bad wishers, you're absolutely right. This is what we've been the first targets of the hybrid and media campaigns in the early 90s. We were called genetically Russophobes. We were called neo-Nazis. We were called anti-Semites, genetic anti-Semites. You can read all those attributes, and these are sort of corrupt people. You cannot buy a stamp without a bribe in the post office, etc. All those anecdotes of the early 90s. And with your own persistent work, you can only prove that it's not only brave people, but also a strong nation. And it can be done ultimately only by Ukrainians themselves. We can share mistakes. Our development has not been linear as well. And of course, European Union is the best game in town in Europe, but we have had our own failures. And 2008 economic crisis was one of the really, really tough challenges. When we lost double digits of economy after real estate bubble and short of liquidity. So when actually that was the reason why we lost also considerable part of our population, which could not pay mortgages after the real estate bubble. It was not because of the it was not only because of the open borders and sort of labor mobility within the union, but as an aftermath of the 2008 economic crisis. But we wanted to succeed. We wanted to use drastic medicine. Unlike Greece, again, we opted in a very, very brutal, hard way. But we resumed the growth in six quarters of the year 2010. So there is recipe, there is medicine, but the commitment and the goal is very important. And again, I'm coming back a little bit to the digital and IT things. We think that this is also one of the area where our companies could partner in hardware, in software, in application of those products, which will eventually help also you better to run your country. Thank you.
Дуже дякую. Я також мала таку.
Also, I had the intention to comment because I believe that the picture is not well balanced, and we may say that the glass half empty or half full, but the previous speakers said it in such a good way that I won't comment. So, Natalia, you're given the floor. So, thank you very much for this research. My question is about point 4.3 about disinformation and its perception, susceptibility of public opinion in Latvia to Russian disinformation. So there is such a bulletin, and in Ukraine we heard about it from former ambassador of Latvia to Ukraine. And Mr. Wilkins, and he continued to support the communication with Ukrainian experts. And also recently, the MPs of the Netherlands, supported by the Prime Minister of this country, they came up with an initiative to cancel this edition because it violates, in their opinion, the principles of democracy. Kateryna, what is your opinion? Why it happened in the Netherlands? And can this initiative be especially supported and at the same time, along the same lines?
Esteemed State Secretary, the question relates to the how effective is the influence of the EU disinformation review on the mindset of Latvian society? Is it effective enough or not? And the second question, what do you think? Will this rather alarming initiative of the Netherlands be supported by at least some other EU member states? Thank you. І наостанок ще те, що я проглянула поки що, чого, на мій погляд, трохи.
And one more thing that is lacking. I believe that for Ukraine, it would be really important to have the experience of Latvia concerning reforms in the sphere of education, specifically about the use of languages and also the susceptibility of this issue for Ukraine and the use and development of multilingual education. And the experience of Latvia in this area is priceless. And I would like to introduce this topic in your further research. Thank you, Natalia. And about your issue, about your question about the Netherlands, this news also raised concerns. From one side, I'm not surprised, because the Netherlands is the Eurosceptic country historically, and for me, I believe that we should have a dialogue with the Netherlands, and I believe that we will be able to carry out such research concerning this country, but I want to give the floor to my colleague in order to throw the light on this issue.
If I'm informed correctly, there were some voices in the Netherlands regarding this Eastern Stratcom group. There were some concerns whether this group is advocating a sort of censorship regarding the Russian-originated media. In Latvia, we have been trying to have a kind of balanced, comprehensive approach. We have, our authorities have used fines and suspensions for transmission. A couple of cases, I think 2-3 cases, when Russian media outlets were broadcasting inflammatory programs which were really which were rated as an incitement to violence, as an incitement for hatred. It has been done 2 or 3 times, I think 3 times, but it has not been used more regularly. What our policy mostly centered on facilitation of the so-called critical thinking. We have established the Baltic Center of Media Excellence, Media Literacy, and we are supporting all kind of international networks. I think some Ukrainian colleagues have visited the center as well, helping editors, journalists, media people, cyber experts to deal with the current landscape. It's very complicated, it's very changing. There are a lot of new inventions on the market. We are now in the middle of this Facebook controversy. It's not only Russia, but also some networks which are operating from UK and from US. So it's a very complex subject. You're absolutely right. We have 2 centers: NATO Center for Strategic Communications, which does a lot of research on Ukraine, by the way, and Russian aggression against Ukraine. But we should not limit discussion only to diplomats or military experts. We should engage broader public, and this media center of excellence is engaged in kind of proactive dissemination of the critical thinking concept. I think we have had quite good result overall. if we talk about the ethnic Russian minority in Latvia, I think it's important to stress that it's a very diverse group of people. We have Russians who have lived in Latvia since 17th century, old believers, people with really deep roots. But we also have fairly recent people who came into Latvia in the late 80s, in the mid 80s, and quite big group of them are former Red Army officers, apparatchiks, kind of die-hard communists, nomenclatura people, and it's a challenge to induce critical thinking to this group of people. Just last week we had also on the Latvian territory these so-called elections of President Putin. Of course, we were quite interested to see what would be the trend. We don't know exact number of the Russian citizens in Latvia, but could be around 55,000. And official data shows that 20,000 participated, which is 5% less than 6 years ago. I don't know. I don't have full picture, but it seems that there hasn't been an increase in participation. So, of course, these people are mostly consumers of the Russian programs, but I think that this group is not growing, is not enlarging. So I think we are making good progress in this field. And of course, sharing of experience in this domain again is, I think, very, very important.
Дуже дякую. Прошу також Елізабета Візгунова. Вона
Thank you very much. And Elizabeth would like to comment on this issue.
I think one of the issues that we do discuss in the audit is the reconsolidation or the attempt to reconsolidate the memory space. Now, there are many very contagious issues as regards to Latvian history, which very strongly correlate with what happened and the interpretation of what happened in Ukraine, which are also strongly marked by ethnic belonging. And I think this is definitely something that is still probably also on the agenda of the Ukrainian government. And it definitely strongly relates to the media spaces the population follows, because the mythology around historic events, for instance, the accession of the Baltic states to the USSR, or the voluntary accession, or was it an occupation annexation, is also something which is still somewhat contested in certain groups of society. So this is definitely something that has to be put on the menu. Now, as for the concluding remarks, I would want to perhaps say, once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you as well for your remarks and your really thorough analysis. Now, I think we have been, on the flip side, very consistent in our strategic communication and indeed delivered a rather positive message as regards to the Latvian-Ukrainian relationship. Indeed, it seems to be a non-rivalry and indeed a friendship in Europe, which is now ridden with conflict. We do also seem to share many things, and weirdly so, we are not fighting over it, whereas there are certain actors in Europe which are willing to fight over the things they perceive that they share with someone. Now, probably the three things that kind of come to my mind is firstly that we still have the challenges of the future. Now, the parliamentary elections that are coming up in Latvia in October 2018 seem to promise definitely a non-changing position of Latvia vis-a-vis Ukraine and full support of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. This is something that derived from the interviews with the relevant stakeholders in the Latvian political scene. And I think the challenge for Ukraine for next year's election is also to maintain a very strong and a grounded vision of Europe in all of its political circles, and seeing itself as a part of the European continent and the common European home. Secondly, I think there is going to be somewhat of a challenge of stability versus progress, because progress definitely has to be made in many policy areas. We discussed corruption, we discussed and we touched upon the rule of law. And there's probably still some work to be done as regards to corruption also in Latvia, not only in Ukraine. And lastly, it is indeed looking to the future and not only pondering upon the challenges of the past and what has happened to us in the past, but looking at the future and also at the same time being able to tackle the challenges of today, regardless of how gloomy it sometimes might seem. So thank you very much for coming once again.
Дуже дякую. На цьому я хотіла подякувати.
So I would like to thank Elizabeth Izgunova for this wonderful experience of cooperation. I would like to thank our speakers. Yes, a comment from Vasil. So I would like to thank once again the New Europe Center. This is really an important work that helps us in the ministry, and it helps colleagues from abroad to understand the situation. So we ask you to continue your important work, and we will help you. And I believe that many countries wait for your research, and we thank our colleagues from Latvia for this wonderful and fruitful discussion.
Everyone, and my only wish is that the next audit will happen not after 100 years, but sooner than that, and it will be even, you'll have even more recommendations for us to implement. And of course, everyone is invited to Latvia, to Riga, to other places, to share your experience with us. I think these people-to-people contacts in this digital age remain very much fundamental. Thank you, and every success to Ukraine. Thank you.
Щиро дякую за добрі побажання. Дякую.
Thank you very much. We thank the participants of our discussion for being with us today. We thank the Embassy of Latvia, Ukraine, and we thank those who came here at 9 in the morning, and I believe that our discussion was really fruitful. Until the next time, goodbye.